Have you ever really thought about how difficult it is to navigate ships, as in relationships? I mean, parenting is hard. Marriage is hard. Friendships, maintaining friendships, it's hard. Working with others at work, on a team, in school, it's hard. I mean, just last week, a team member here shared some feedback with me about what it's like to be on the receiving end of me. It's hard. Or at home, words were said, I react, they react, and you know what happens? You look back and there are small words and phrases that stick with us. And sometimes they're not small. I mean, can you relate to that? Can you relate to some of those feelings? Man, I know that I can. It reminds me of this statement that you probably heard before. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. And I know for many of you, you kind of see the irony of this statement. We don't actually know where this statement came from, but it was first recorded by Christians. The African Methodist Church in the 1800s published it in one of their newsletters. It's one of the first places we see it written. The intent was to help church members deal with some of the hurtful things that people said and probably what white people were saying to them, which is just awful when you think about it. It breaks my heart that this still happens today. I mean, the intent of this is like, hey, let's not let words hurt us, right? We'd like to think that we're stronger, that we can handle the tough words in life. But my guess is that if I were to go around the room, if we were to give you, each of you, an opportunity to share a story, every one of you, after thinking about it, some of you have it right now. You have a moment where a parent, a sibling, an ex, a child, a coach, a teacher, where someone said words that hurt, and you can still remember it. You could probably still feel it, which means this cute little rhyme is really a big lie. The truth is we heal from physical hurts far quicker than we do from emotional wounds. That's why the Proverbs say, the tongue can bring death or life, and those who love to talk will reap the consequences of whatever type of words that you use. I mean, the sad reality is that our words like sticks and stones can be weapons, and they can leave wounds. And so the question that I want to explore today is, what is it that causes our words to become weapons to others, and how do we stop them from wounding others and being wounded by them? And so whatever campus you're at, I'm so glad that you're here. For those of you that are here for the first time, maybe celebrating with somebody who got baptized, my name is Ben, and we're in this series called I Said This, You Heard That, and we have a guiding passage in the New Testament that we've been looking at every week. And so if you're new, you're off the hook. But if you've been here, this is your opportunity to see if you have it memorized, okay? So we're going to say it at all of our campuses, wherever you're watching, at home or online. For those of you that have been watching, we're going to say Ephesians 4:29 out loud together. Ready? It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but, okay, I'll put it up on the screen. But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. This has been our guiding passage, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but it actually makes a great prayer. Like when you head into work or you head into a difficult conversation, you can make this your prayer to God. And what are we asking God's Spirit to help us do? To use words that are healthful, not unwholesome, not coming from an unhealthy place, like a pure heart. This is about your motives, like what's going on inside. And then we also want words that are helpful for building others up according to their needs. We want healthful words and helpful words. And if we do that, we will be less offensive and less offendable. But in order to get better at that, we really need to focus on that first part, the unwholesome talk, not the curse words. That's what people tend to think of here. We need to think about what's going on the inside, our heart. Jesus actually teaches on this, why the heart is so important, why the heart plays a role in our words becoming weapons. Here's what he taught on the Sermon on the Mount. Luke, who was a first century investigative reporter, went around and collected some of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. This is a portion of what he recorded on the Sermon on the Mount of what Jesus taught. Jesus said, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. So a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." So what is Jesus teaching? He's teaching, pay attention to what you are storing in here, more than what you are reacting to out there. If you spend any time reading Jesus' teachings, he's always pushing on, pointing to the religious leaders who were so concerned about the rules, hand washing, ritual, no swear words, no bad things out there. How dare you do those things out there? That was their posture. And Jesus is like, hey, let's redirect our focus to our own thoughts, attitudes, and desires within your heart. Because the mouth speaks of what the heart is full of. In other words, what he's saying is what comes out of you is an indicator of what's stored inside of you. Your mouth is only going to speak, it's going to leak, it's going to let out. Your words are going to reveal what's really going on in your heart. And so the question that we need to start exploring, and it's a challenging question, because we would much rather focus on what we see out there. My encouragement to you would be to look at what has your heart been full of lately. I mean, honestly, this is why words are so important to God. Not because he has rules for you to follow, and if you violate a word or a rule, or you say a word that you're not supposed to, that's it, you're out. No, God actually wants a relationship with you. He actually cares about your heart, and your words revealed what's stored in there. I mean, notice the metaphor that he uses. He talks about good trees. No good tree bears bad fruit, and no bad tree bears good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. Jesus is using a common farming illustration that his audience would have understood, and it's obvious. You identify a tree by its fruit. I mean, when was the last time you went to the grocery store, bought some bananas, and when you opened it up, M&Ms came falling out? Like, that would be cool, but no, when you look at a banana, you know what you're getting. No matter how hard you try, Jesus is like, you're never going to get grapes from briars. It's not the way that it works. The fruit is an outward expression of what is true on the inside. And so Jesus clarifies the same is true for you and me. A good person brings good things out of the good stored up in the heart. And so let's go back to the question, what causes our words to become weapons? Well, a heart that is full of evil things will weaponize words that wound others. So do you have an evil heart? Now that's like, okay, that's an intense word. I mean, when I look around, I know many of you. I know people watching online and on TV. I don't see evil. It's like, that's an intense word. Y'all seem like a good group to me. I mean, a few of you may have a few screws loose, but that's okay. I wouldn't say anything evil. But I think sometimes that's what happens is we look at that word and we go, well, that's not me. So let's think of it this way. A heart full of unhelpful and unhealthful things will weaponize words and be easily wounded. Like, let's not just limit it to the really, 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 really bad people. Let's just pay attention to the unhelpful and unhealthful things that may be stored up in our hearts. See, I want to connect what Jesus is teaching with the Ephesians passage. Remember, unhelpful is when we say words that aren't beneficial to those who are listening, and unhealthful are words that come from something toxic that we're storing inside, that we're allowing to linger in our heart. I want to talk about both of them. The first one is unhelpful. Our words become unhelpful with our unfiltered temperaments. Now, again, if you're new, temperament is basically the way that God wired you. Now, not everything about your life has been put there by God. We'll talk about some of that in a minute. But your temperament is more than just your personality. It's kind of the why behind your personality. You see them in kids at a young age. And so think of it this way. Each temperament has fruit. It's like a fruit tree. And so each temperament has a specific type or a type of fruit. It uses words in a predictable way. And so we've been using colors because I'm a simple man, okay? I want to keep it real simple. We have an assessment. Even if you haven't taken it, I think you're going to be able to travel along with us today. The assessment's available on the app. And all it's there for is to give us a way to evaluate ourselves and to have some helpful conversations with friends and family. But to help illustrate this, these are the 4 colors, the 4 temperaments in general. And it's not perfect. I know some of you get, maybe a little skeptical, but those of you that are yellows, they tend to speak the language of people and fun. They walk into the room and they're like, fliptastic, let's go, let's have some fun, right? They bring energy. Reds, on the other hand, they speak the language of power and control. Let's get it done. Here's what we need to do. Here's the plan. Greens, they speak the language of calm and harmony. They're like, I'm up for whatever, and they're loyal friends. And blues speak the language of perfection and order, and oftentimes bring systems and or creativity to the world around us. And so think of each of these temperaments as a different type of fruit tree. When the fruit is ripe, when the words are timed in healthful and helpful ways, it is powerful. But when the fruit isn't ripe, think about unripe fruit that you eat. It's bitter. That's what each temperament does to our words. When it's not in unfiltered temperament, takes your words and turns it into a bitter taste for others. It takes your strengths and turns it into a weakness. Do you remember how I shared that a team member gave me some feedback earlier, a couple weeks ago? Now remember, I'm a red, yellow, okay? These are my 2 primary. I have 0 green, okay? Just let that set in for a minute, right? And so when I see problems, I love to move to solutions. But my team member, her feedback was that sometimes, Ben, when you solve problems, you attack it so aggressively that you leave people swirling, wondering. Some people even wonder if I'm mad at them, like I think they're the problem. My unfiltered temperament can become a weakness. I'll bulldoze right over people. And so her insight was like, hey, let's just help the team have the aha together. Why? Because our words become unhelpful with unfiltered temperaments. Now, the goal is not for you and me to become different people. See, that's what happens. It's like, oh, I should be less of myself. No, you should be who God created you to be, but just not an unfiltered version of you. That's not helpful. You got to speak in a way that meets others' needs. I mean, if you try to be someone else, it's like a banana trying to be a grape. It's denying what God created the banana to be. So know your temperament. Be who God created you to be. But understand that when you feel pressure, when the stress goes up, when your needs go unmet, which we're going to talk about next week, your temperament will become more and more unfiltered. In fact, each temperament signals when they are stressed or are experiencing unmet needs. There's a tell that every single temperament has that there's some pressure going on. They're like indicator lights. And so it's helpful to pay attention to these signals in you and in the people that you're close to, because when you see it, it'll help you be less offended when you see it. And so these signals really just remind us that what comes out of us is an indicator of the temperament that's under pressure inside of us. And so I want to take a minute to look at each. The first one is yellows. Again, yellows speak the language of people and fun, but when they feel pressure, when they feel stress, they signal with flattery and exaggeration. Flattery, like this excessive praise of others. It feels kind of empty, it's like when they're, oh, you're putting the rest of us to shame. It's like, they don't know what to do with the fact that you look great or whatever. And so they react with excessive praise. You may have some broccoli in your teeth, but they're not going to tell you because they don't want you to think negatively about you. That's the kind of thing that goes on. Or there's exaggerating. It's like they make the story bigger. They elaborate. They talk more. They talk over people. They interrupt people. And the goal is to bring some fun, but they want to be a part of the fun. They want to get attention. Maybe they're feeling overlooked. And so they'll try to create fun even at other people's expense. That's a signal. For reds, who speak the language of power and control, they signal with tone and bluntness. Tone is the volume or the aggression. It's like yelling. It's the intensity at which you speak. You know, they're the type of person that if they see broccoli in your teeth, they're like, "Hey, you got broccoli in your teeth, okay? It's like right here." You know, they're going to tell you, and they're going to tell you loud now, okay? Or when it's time to go, they say, "Hey, it's time to go." When they don't get a response, they just say it louder. "Hey, it's," you know. You can tell, I'm a red. So bluntness is like just being harsh. It's biting comments. It's belittling others. And oftentimes the reds don't see it. Their goal is they're trying to take care of something that is at risk, something important that is at risk, and they're trying to grab control of that. I mean, my kids are laughing right now because they know they've seen Big Red at home, okay? So greens speak the language of calm and harmony, and they signal their pressure or stress with procrastination and stubbornness, okay? Procrastination, they just start to slow down, okay? They delay, they ignore their responsibilities. They'll get to it later. Or stubbornness, they'll just dig in. They refuse to talk or compromise. It's like passive-aggressive manipulation. We were having a conversation about this at our dinner table a couple nights ago, and we have every single color in my family. Just for, a couple of us are reds, and then everybody else. And when we got to the green, how they signal their stress, he was like, "Yep, that's me." It was great. So if you're green, maybe you can relate. What's the goal? They want to get it back to their pace instead of following what they're feeling pressured by. Blues, they signal with moods and nitpicking. I mean, they speak the language of order and perfection and creativity, but they signal they're feeling pressure when they get a little moody. It's like, "Ooh, okay, tiptoe around that person right there." And sometimes they get a little nitpicky, judgmental, cynical, critical. Like, that'll never work. They point out all of the problems. Sometimes blues will expose other people's incompetence to compensate for their own insecurity that they're feeling. I mean, that's the goal. It's to guard against some sort of imperfection that they're trying to control. That's how they signal. So here's what you do. When you see a signal, pay attention to the why behind the words. When you see one of those things in someone else or you, just get curious. What's going on there? And I think your first responsibility, my first responsibility, is to pay attention to ourselves, which for some of you may sound arrogant. I'm not asking you to navel gaze here, but what comes out of you is a result of what's inside of you. And so when my yellow wants to exaggerate or interrupt, I need to learn how to why? When my red wants to power up, I'm learning how to pause. Why do I feel the need to do that? What's really going on in here that is pushing my color in an unfiltered, unhelpful way? I mean, this happened a couple of nights ago with my kids. I had a full day of creating content, different tasks and meetings, feeling some pressure. And by the time that I got home, we were going to watch a show together as a family, and my kids were asking me a bunch of just simple life questions. And I wasn't responding right away because I'm still thinking about all the things I had to get done. And I looked up and I could see on their face, they could sense the stress. And thinking about, me delivering this, I'm like, okay, let's practice what I'm about to preach. I took a deep breath and I just said, "Hey, listen, I had a full day of responsibilities. It's not your fault and it's not your problem. So if I'm a little slow to getting to some of your questions, I'm not bothered by you and I'm not trying to ignore you. I'm just trying to get my brain back on track. And so I'm sorry. I don't want them to feel like it's them." That's how we lower our offensiveness. It's also how we become less offendable. When I know the color of my family or my teammates or my friends, and they start to signal in a way that hurts or is a little annoying, instead of getting offended by what was said, I start by paying attention to the why behind the what. It gives me an opportunity to care for them instead of being offended by them, where I can just say, "Hey, You doing okay? I'm just checking in. I'm not giving them an excuse to be the way that they are. I'm just recognizing that they may be carrying something. Let's not let our words become unhelpful with our unfiltered temperaments. That's one of the best gifts that you can give the people that you care about, is when you show up as a healthy version of you, exactly the way that God created you. Because when we don't, our words become weapons. Another way that our words become weapons is when they come from a toxic place. And so I put it this way: our words become unhealthful when we have ongoing unresolved sin in our life, in our heart, stored up in our heart. And so it's always interesting to me how the room gets quiet when I say that word. I think in part because we live in a culture that's a little allergic to the word sin. And I understand there have certainly been some people who have misused that in abusive ways, but sin is not just like the bad things that we do. And I'll be honest, nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, I'm a terrible sinner, right? But let's just talk about it intellectually for a moment. Sin, biblically, is when we separate from God and his way of life. It's when we do it our way, we make up our rules, we do what we think is best instead of living a trust-filled, surrendered life to God. So sin is pride, when we want it our way. Sin is jealousy, when we don't think we've been given what we deserve. Sin is bitterness. It's insecurity. It's a life of fear. Sin also happens when other people make choices that leave us hurt. And now we have to deal with that betrayal, that injustice. It may not be a sin that you committed, but it's still a sin that you store up in our heart. And what happens is the more we store that, it'll come out in toxic and weaponized ways. This is why the Proverbs say, guard your heart above all else, because it determines the course of your life. In other words, be aware of what is in your heart. Like oftentimes we just try to shut off the volume and ignore it, and we medicate it and go on and do more, but we need to guard against these toxic things. Why? Because when we allow it to go unresolved in here, it will leak out there. And it'll often leak on the people that you care about. For example, angry words typically signal that we have stored up hurt and bitterness. Now, anger is something that we all experience. It's not a sin to be angry. In fact, we're going to explore this more in our next series leading up to Easter called Angry Jesus, where we're going to look at moments where Jesus got angry and pull out of them some of the things that I think are applicable to our life today. But anger, the emotion, it's a secondary emotion, which means something else has to happen that triggers our anger, and oftentimes it's unresolved hurt. It could be the consequences of your sin that hurt and embarrass you, or it could be the sin someone else did to you, to us. And when it's left unaddressed, it becomes like a wound or a bruise. It hurts. And sometimes we forget that it's there until we get bumped. Have you ever had an injury, gone through surgery, somebody comes up to you, like have a sunburn, and somebody comes up to you and gives you a big old slap on the back, and you're like, you react to them. You get mad at who bumped us, but the reality is it was the hurt that was there before. That's what happens. When we store up this hurt, this unresolved hurt in our life that we or someone else did, man, it can come out in angry ways at strangers. So pay attention to your angry words and get curious about the why behind the words, because maybe God is inviting you to find freedom from that hurt so that you stop spewing anger all over the people around you. God wants you to begin the journey of healing, because what comes out of you is really an indicator of something you've stored up inside of you. Another example is discontent words signal that we have envy in our heart. Do you complain a lot? Some of you are like, no, but I know somebody who does. It's like, do you say words like, it's not fair? In your heart, do you criticize what other people get or what they have? See, what comes out of you is an indicator of what's stored inside of you. In a heart full of envy, it will ooze all over the good of other people. You won't celebrate the good things in life and others. You won't enjoy much of anything because comparison is the thief of joy. Could it be when envy starts filling your heart, you don't ever feel like you have enough and you feel like what the good the other people get, they don't deserve? Man, if that's filling your heart today, God's inviting you to find freedom from that envy so that those words stop coming out of you onto other people. Another signal is controlling words. They signal that we have we have fear that we're storing up in our heart. You need a certain outcome. You need it to go the way that you need it to go. And so what happens when we have this fear, like what if it's not going to turn out the way that we want? We'll use words with unnecessary urgency and directness and pushiness. If that's you, if you're using controlling words with your kids or your siblings or your coworkers all the time, could it be that maybe the reason why is because you have a fear stored up in your heart? A fear of what if? Like you're trying to avoid this consequence at all costs. See, the more anxiety we hold in our heart, the more it'll create toxic words from you to those around you. Another way that we weaponize words is when we try to impress others. It just signals that we have stored up guilt and shame. We want others to like us. We all do. We want people to like us, but sometimes we'll become a chameleon. We'll become like the people that we are around to just try to fit in. We'll say the jokes, we'll tell stories, we want to be noticed. It's an indicator that you may be storing some guilt and shame. And maybe for you, you're like, that doesn't make sense. Well, when you look in the mirror, do you like what you see? Like who you really are? Because oftentimes the need to impress others is because we don't like who we really are and we're afraid no one will. And so we play a part to try to impress, or sometimes we try to belittle others. Because if we can bring them down a little bit, it'll make us feel better about ourselves. And so we wouldn't call ourselves a bully, but we kind of just joke and pick at everybody else's flaws. Well, that doesn't make anybody better. And the way out of belittling others isn't just to tell yourself to stop. No, you have to deal with the guilt and the shame stored up in our heart. Jesus died on the cross and offers forgiveness so that you don't have to store that up and therefore allow that to ooze all over the people around you. God wants to help you find freedom from that. Lastly, being easily offended, and there are probably other examples, but being easily offended signals that we have stored up pride. Pastor John Bevere wrote a book a few years ago called The Bait of Satan, God's Enemy. See, Satan knows he can render you and me useless if he can bait us into being easily offended. Let me be clear. There are times where what has been done against you or someone that you care about is offensive, and we should speak up or put boundaries in place or get help. But we live in a world that has taken the bait, and now so many people are stuck, so easily offended over what I can't say, over what they did or didn't do, or by their language, or that culture, or the flag, or that interview, or the halftime show, or fill in the blank with whatever people are addicted to outrage about. We can get so riled up over the silliest of things. And the question is, what does that say about our heart? I think it says that we have stored up pride. Pride? Yes, pride. Because you'd never do anything like that. That's what pride says. Pride because we're so much better than that. Pride because I've earned it. I deserve it. Pride because we know the truth and we're standing up for it. Should we stand up for the truth? Sure. But not always be so easily offended. See, pride in our heart will cause all sorts of toxic things to come out of you to the people around you. So the question is really, what has been stored up in your heart lately? Like, our unfiltered temperament and unresolved sin will cause our words to come out in unhelpful and unhealthful ways. It will weaponize our words, and it will make us wound others. Like, once we start to identify that, then the question is like, how do we disarm our words? I want to go back to our guiding passage. In Ephesians, it says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of our mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. And here's the small little thing that's so easily to miss. It's the word that. Now, I know it's been a few years since you took grammar. It was for me too. But that word, that, is a conjunction. It explains the result of all that came before. The following statement is the outcome. It's what happens when we don't let any unwholesome talk come out of our mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up. The result is that it may benefit those who listen. And in the original language, the first century audience would have heard something a little different. We do all of this so that it would administer grace. We do all of this so that we can partner with God in filling our world with His grace. See, when you connect your heart to God's grace, your words will help connect people to God's grace. It replaces the unhealthful and unhelpful words with words that are full of Him. And the more you fill His heart with His grace, the more it will come out of you to those around you in life-giving ways. Recently, I saw a visual that helps illustrate this. And so I invited Luke, our Perrysburg campus pastor, to come out on stage. Give Luke a round of applause for joining me. So this gap really represents kind of the opportunity and the challenge that we have in all of our relationships. And Luke, obviously, is a friend of mine, but what I want you to do is I want you to imagine, for the most part, until the Guardians play the Tigers, and then Nemesis. But I want you to imagine a relationship in your life that you want to improve. It could be a marriage, it could be a friendship, it could be a family relationship, it could be a group of people that you just feel this gap in, this distance. And here's the thing, nobody really wants gaps. We are wired for connection. When we have that gap and we feel it at the grocery store aisle, or when we see their profile picture on social media, it creates this dissonance in us. And so we don't want gaps, but oftentimes when an opportunity for connection comes up, maybe you're different, but we tend to focus primarily on the impact that it's going to have on us. We think when an opportunity shows up for connection, we think to ourselves, I don't know if I really have the time or the energy for that. And so, or maybe we look at our temperament, and when we see the gap, we think to ourselves, I'm not as fun as a yellow or those people. I'm kind of annoying. Whatever word that you use to describe yourself in a negative light will be like, I don't know if people really like me. Or maybe we look at their temperament and we think, I don't know if you know this, but Luke is a raging yellow. And so it's like stories and interruptions and yap, 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 yap all the time, Or maybe your friend is different. They're red like me, big red, loud, obnoxious, over the top. Or they're picky, or they're just, quiet all of the time. We look at their temperament and we think, oh, okay, oh man, there's just a little barrier. Or maybe they say something that's unhelpful and, it wasn't fun. And so you react to that. Or maybe you do react to that and it puts you in this crazy cycle. Do you see what's happening here? Like, we want to connect, but when we think about the impact that it's having on us, we start to build up this wall, which sometimes leads to hurt or fear and insecurity in us. And so it builds up. Or maybe it's the fear and insecurity in them because they sense the wall and we can't see it. Or maybe we just start to see what we don't like in ourselves, our own guilt and shame. And we think, I don't know if anybody can really connect with me. Because if they could see the real me, I don't know that it's worth relationship. Our unfiltered temperaments create unhelpful words, and unresolved sin creates barriers between us and others. But when we remember God's grace, where he pursued us, where he loved and forgave us, that we did nothing to earn, that we can't deserve, it gives us a different place to stand. We can stand on his grace in our life. And when I remember that the most powerful person in the universe is for me, not against me, like I can surrender my fear and I can trust him. And when God's grace reminds me that I have the good opinion of the only person in the universe that really matters, like I don't have to worry about what y'all think because God says that he loves me. Man, when I remember that, like I don't have to worry about what others think. In fact, I don't even have to worry about the way that I'm wired. The Bible says that God knit me together. He knows me, flaws and all, and yet still loves me. And so if his love, that kind of love, has been extended to me with my flaws and it lives in me, then I'm able to extend that to others. In fact, Jesus said that he is so focused on me. He says, I hold you in my hand. Nobody can take you off. If he is that focused on me, then I don't have to be focused on myself and worry about my needs, which is what enables me to then connect with others. That is the power of God's grace, because unfiltered temperaments and unresolved sin builds barriers, but God's grace can build bridges, even with difficult people. So Luke, thanks. Let's give him a round of applause. My question to you today is, what is it that God is saying to you? Like when you think about that relationship, where is it that you need to allow God's grace to do some work in your life? We actually want to give you a moment to be a little responsive to God, and so our team is going to play a song that I hope will help you think about your life. Think about the people that God has put around you to administer some grace. And so I just want you prayerfully right now to be asking God, what are you saying to me? And then what are you going to do about it? Because the goal isn't to just sit here and think, about an area of our life. It's to walk out of these doors by the power of God's Spirit, moving in the direction that he's inviting us to go. And so I want you to take a moment to be responsive. All of our response areas are open. And so if you need a tactile way to remember God's grace, take communion. If you need to surrender a sin or something at the cross, go there. If you want to mark a moment with God by lighting a candle for his light and his presence in your life, I want to encourage you, those of you that are physically here, to do that right now. Would you make that your prayer with me? God, thank you so much for loving us. Thank you for your grace, that you pursued us. You invite us to find freedom. You invite us to live humbly. And so clarify the relationships that you want to build some bridges in our life. And would you give us the courage to carry your love towards them, your grace towards them. Thank you for the transformation you're doing in our hearts right now. And would you continue it over the days and years ahead? We pray in Jesus' name.